Dillian the Body Snatcher right here. It's a champ. Big up to Sporting Icon. Subscribe. Otherwise, I might pay you guys a visit.
So a fight that I would certainly watch would be Andy Ruiz Jr. versus King Kong Luis Ortiz. Now, Andy Ruiz Jr., he gets victory over Chris Arreola this past weekend. It was pretty much a one-sided victory in my opinion. I thought he won that fight quite handily. Yes, he did get dropped in round number 2. Heavyweight boxing, anything can happen, right? But I think overall, Andy Ruiz Jr. got the victory, done what he's supposed to do outside of potentially stopping Chris Arreola. But again, I know some people may be a little bit upset with Andy Ruiz Jr.'s performance because he didn't stop Chris Arreola. Now, Chris Arreola, firstly, he's a very, very durable opponent. Secondly, he is in much better shape for this fight than we've probably ever seen him, really. Ever since probably his early days, let's be brutally honest. I know people keep calling him like a 40-year-old Chris Arreola. He's not. He's what, 37? That's not 40, is it? Unless, of course, we're splitting hairs. But I thought that Andy Ruiz Jr., he'd done okay in that fight. Of course, he does have to get used to having Eddie Reynoso in his corner. He has gone through a weight loss program. So I think it's going to take him a while to probably find his feet. Now, as far as the fight with King Kong Luis Ortiz is concerned, Luis Ortiz has said that he wants to fight next. He's going to sit back and patiently wait for this fight. Now, personally, I don't like when I hear fighters say, I'm going to sit back and wait. Don't wait, chase it. Get hold of your team, your management team. Get hold of Al Heyman and say, let's get this fight done. Now, is it likely for this fight to happen next? It's possible. It is possible. I know Andy Ruiz Jr. did say after the Chris Arreola fight that he's open to have a rematch with Chris Arreola. I don't know why he needs to run it back. It was a good fight. Chris Arreola was in the fight at times for sure. But do we need to see it again? In my opinion, no. I think Andy Ruiz Jr. should be looking at somebody like a Luis Ortiz, if of course that's possible. Of course, we're talking about in-house fights here. The PBC love their in-house fights. I know most people would love to see Andy Ruiz Jr. take on Deontay Wilder. I would too. In fact, I would love Deontay Wilder to go fight Dillian Whyte, but that ain't going to happen, is it? I'd love Andy Ruiz Jr. to go fight Dillian Whyte, but that ain't going to happen, is it? But as far as Dillian Whyte being part of that kind of picture, it's unlikely because he's not a PBC fighter. But when it comes to Deontay Wilder and Andy Ruiz Jr., is it likely to happen? Yeah, possibly. Maybe towards the very end of the year, maybe early next year, as we're in May now. So Deontay Wilder, he hasn't even announced an opponent yet. So he's going to want some kind of tune-up fight. He's not going to want to come back and take on somebody who's a good fighter, is he? Let's be honest. He's going to take on somebody who's average at best. Look at his track record, okay? I'm not hating on the guy. Look at his track record. So in the meantime, why don't we see Andy Ruiz Jr. and King Kong Luis Ortiz? And you could probably argue that would be a bit of a crossroads fight, wouldn't it? Where does the loser go? Could Luis Ortiz take a loss to Andy Ruiz Jr. and continue? Unlikely. Could Andy Ruiz Jr. lose to King Kong Luis Ortiz and continue? I mean, he could. If anybody could, it'd probably be Andy Ruiz Jr., but it's going to take him a bit of a road to recovery. And the last thing in the world Andy Ruiz Jr. needs is to have a reputation as being a guy who got a victory over Anthony Joshua and then got schooled in a rematch. Because again, this whole fight with Chris Arreola was all built around Anthony Joshua and how he defeated Anthony Joshua. And he hasn't had a fight in X amount of time since Anthony Joshua. Anthony Joshua was mentioned literally every step of the way during this build-up, especially like the last week of it. Andy Ruiz Jr., I'm sure, doesn't want to be just remembered for that. He wants to be remembered for taking on big name guys. Granted, Luis Ortiz, he's 42 years old, but he didn't have massive miles on the clock. He does in the sense of his amateur days, because he did have, 350 odd fights as an amateur. Okay, he didn't win anything. He never qualified for any kind of world tournaments or won any kind of world tournaments or even went to the Olympics. But he did have a long career over there. So maybe he has got some miles on the clock. Maybe this will probably explain why he hasn't really been fighting the best himself. But it's a fight that I'm interested in. I would watch this fight. I wouldn't watch it on pay-per-view. I certainly wouldn't do that. In America, you know that kind of fight will be on pay-per-view. The PBC love nothing more than something that has even just a little bit of interest, pay-per-view it. That's what they do. Don't get me wrong, we kind of have that here in the UK as well for the most part. But in America, anything that's even just a little bit interesting is pay-per-view. So Andy Ruiz Jr. versus King Kong Luis Ortiz would certainly be pay-per-view. And there's nothing wrong with making that fight if Deontay Wilder is not going to be in the picture for an Andy Ruiz Jr. fight. Or maybe Deontay Wilder, he may look at Andy Ruiz Jr.'s performance and think, well, he did get knocked down by Chris Arreola. I beat Chris Arreola, so why not? Why not do it next? And if he does, big props to him. But I don't think so. I really don't think so. Anyway, that's my thoughts on this particular fight. King Kong Luis Ortiz versus Andy Ruiz Jr. Would you watch it? I would. Drop your thoughts below. Click thumbs up. Subscribe. Catch you all in the next video.